The first item on our agenda is Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next item is roll call.
Please press yes to indicate your presence. All members are present.
Great, thank you very much. We have a bunch of proclamations, but I think I'm only going to read one out loud, but I want to mention we have the others on our website. It's Ovarian Cancer Month, National Rail Safety Week, National Suicide Prevention and Action Month, Childhood Cancer Awareness Month, International Week of Deaf People, Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and Hispanic Heritage Month. Additionally, next week will be Constitution Week, so I'll read this. We have somebody here that will accept the proclamation. Whereas our Constitution is founded on fundamental trust in America's citizens, and whereas on September 17th, 1787, our constitutional framers signed the U.S. Constitution at Independence Hall in Philadelphia, forging a new government for the United States. And whereas the story of the framing, signing, and adoption of that epical document constitutes one of the most significant chapters in the history of our country, and whereas the United States Constitution stands as a testament to the tenacity of Americans throughout history to maintain their liberties, freedoms, and inalienable rights, and whereas it is fitting that every American should reflect upon the vision and fortitude of our forebears in creating a charter designed to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, and promote general welfare and secure the blessings of liberty for themselves and for the fortunate millions who were to follow them as citizens of this nation. And whereas the Congress, by a joint resolution approved August 2nd, 1956, has requested the President to set aside the week beginning of September 17th of each year as Constitution Week, a time for the contemplation and commemoration of the historic acts which resulted in the formation of our Constitution. And whereas September 17th marks the 234th anniversary of the Constitution of the United States, and we celebrate this founding charter and reflect on the privilege of being an American with all the rights and responsibilities which that privilege involves. Now therefore be it resolved that I, Katie Rosenberg, Mayor of the City of Wausau, do hereby proclaim September 17th through 23rd, 2021 as Constitution Week in the City of Wausau, State of Wisconsin, and I commend this observance to all citizens and encourage them to demonstrate our commitment to the United States of America and appreciation for the liberty of our constitutional framers secured for us. And I know that we have somebody here who might say a few words.
My name is Jane Johnson, and I live at 918 Franklin Street in Wausau, and I'm here to pick up this proclamation on behalf of the Wausau chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution. I don't have a lot to say except to say that the Daughters of the American Revolution actually started this the attempt to recognize the Constitution as a national law, and it was done by President Eisenhower. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All right, the next item on our agenda is public comment. I have 3 people who have registered, the first being Dan Barth. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Dan Barth. I live at 206-540 Rabick Lane, Mosinee. In 2019, the Wausau Common Council passed a resolution in favor of federal climate legislation. It is referred to in the Environmental Justice Resolution the Committee of the Whole discussed and advanced last week, and I applaud you for both. The matter of the future of the Cleveland Avenue property you will be discussing later tonight is in fact a test of your commitment to both action on climate and environmental justice. There are other options for the property in question. The one that I will suggest lives up to the 2 resolutions just referred to and would have financial benefits for the city government to boot. The brownfields property under consideration would be a perfect site for a solar garden. What more appropriate and uplifting use could there be for this property than to produce clean, renewable electricity there? And if you included several level 2 electric car charging stations for the people of the surrounding neighborhood, so much the better from an environmental justice perspective. In addition, the city of Wausau would obtain a financial benefit from a long-term lease to the utility company operating this solar project. This should at least be discussed with the residents of the neighborhood in accordance with the goals and procedures of the Environmental Justice Resolution. I urge you to consider this option instead of the one you're entertaining tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, I have Terry Killian.
Good evening. My name is Terry Killian. I reside at 133 East Thomas Street, and I am a co-spokesperson for Citizens for a Clean Wausau. Citizens for a Clean Wausau is strongly opposed to approving the funding for the DPW Feasibility Study for 1300 Cleveland Avenue. In recent months, the City Council received tens of emails from neighborhood and community members clearly stating their desire to have 1300 Cleveland Avenue remediated to the highest standards and to have no more industrial expansion in this largely residential neighborhood. Approving tonight's funding item for 1300 Cleveland Avenue would severely undercut the public participation process, the articulated desires of the people, and the city's commitment to the people to clean up this property as stringently as possible. If this property is to be remediated up to the standards of a residential scenario, it's important that residential zoning and planned residential land use remain through the ultimate closure request and closure process with regulators. 1, we ask that the city keep its word to the neighborhood and community about pursuing a rigorous cleanup. And 2, we ask that the city recognize and respect the high volume of citizen input it has received. In order to honor these requests, current pursuits for 1300 Cleveland Avenue, such as the DPW's feasibility study request, must be halted and stopped. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, I have Thomas Brown.
Quick question, since you read the resolution on the Constitution. Who was the Constitution written by? Anybody?
Just so you know, during public comment, we don't respond to
You
questions.
don't respond? Oh, it's interesting. The other comment I would make would be, there were how many females at that writing of the U.S. Constitution? How many people were eligible to vote? Keep that in mind as you go through this process. It relates to what I want to talk about just briefly. At the last meeting, there was a rather extensive discussion about words. There were some comments made about representation. And I want to refer back to comments that I made probably a couple of months ago when I asked the council to step forward and require city employees to be vaccinated or identified as non-vaccinated employees. As you can see, in the last couple of months, COVID has gotten much more serious, and I still would like that request to be followed through. And that relates to the idea of representation. Comments were made to the effect that as a representative, it's my job to reflect my ward, district, whatever it may be. If 75% of your ward is ignorant and stupid on an issue and you're not, you do not reflect that 75%. You reflect what's best for the community as a whole. And I submit to you that's your number one charge: create a safe community. Go ahead and issue a decree that city employees will be either tested weekly or vaccinated. It's not that difficult to do. We talked about Wausau being a great city. We're not a great city if we're going to encourage people to be not vaccinated. It's an impingement upon my right for safety. So that's the first thing is I'd like you to do is require vaccinations. And bear in mind that words, proclamations, why don't we do all the proclamations for the year at one time? You only read one because there was an objective to save time, because it would be incredibly time-consuming to go through all of them. Let's do September proclamations, November, December. Those are words that have really very little meaning because there's nothing behind them except awareness. And until you do put action to words, they don't matter.
Thank you. That is all I have signed up for public comment. So we are moving on now to the consent agenda. I did have a request to remove item 210104, so that will be considered separately, but I would entertain a motion for the rest. Motion by Herbst, second by Watson. Any discussion here? Not seeing any, so when the clerk tells you to vote.
You can begin voting. Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, we are now on to item 210104. It's an item from SISM, the final resolution levying special assessments for the 2021 street construction projects. I would entertain a motion. Motion by Peckham, second by Larson. Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. I requested that this item be pulled because at this point, as it's written, the special assessment item includes the project that's currently underway on North Third Avenue. That project continues to be severely delayed based on the conduct of the contractor. Engineering continues to manage that and assess liquidated damages per the contract. The engineering team today indicated that based on the completion date of the project, that it would be more appropriate to levy those special assessments to the residents of North Third Avenue on a later date, because the project may still be in progress when everyone else's special assessments are due. And so they would like to wait for the completion of the project and then levy those special assessments to those citizens in a separate voting action. So my amendment is to remove from the list of streets in the item, North Third Avenue.
Okay, so we have a motion to amend the resolution removing North Third Street Avenue from Randolph Street to Bos Creek Drive. Do I have a second? Second by Wodinski. Any discussion on the amendment? Okay, I think we can vote on this.
You can vote. Motion passes unanimously.
All right, so we are now, yes.
So now you got to vote on that.
Yes, that's what I was about to say. Okay, so we are now ready to vote on the resolution as amended, levying special assessments for the 2021 street construction project. Alder Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor. It happens that in looking at the street construction, I was a little flabbergasted for the economy and for some of my neighbors that have smaller homes that are under $100,000, that some of them are going to be getting an assessment of over $3,000. It happens on my street, was done back in 2006 or 7, and I think my assessment was under $1,000. I do think that if there's any way we can use additional community development block grant or extend the payments to a longer period of time for some people, maybe over 5 to 10 years, or the Biden funding, that we should do so. It's the way the costs are going, but for people that are owning their homes and modest homes, these are whoppers of bills and are going to be very difficult for people to pay. And I do think we should be not billing them for the 100%, we should be looking at other alternatives to make this more affordable. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. The rate per square foot for all of the items that are included under special assessments are set at the beginning of the year, and they are fairly assessed based on the amount of frontage or the amount of distance that each home possesses. And block grant, if we would like to apply that to projects, we need to plan for that over a year in advance. There's a timeline if you intend to use those funds with which you have to approve them, acquire them, and spend them down. So that is not an option at this late date when the assessments are ready to be levied and the work is done or in progress. That said, we just approved the 2022 rate in SISM last week, and we kept it exactly the same. All of the residents received advance notice for what their projected assessments would be, and so they've had all kinds of time to prepare for that. And my understanding is that they have the option to spread that over a 3-year period of time. Is that correct? I believe it's 3 years that they can spread that out. So none of this should be a surprise as far as the amounts or the amount of frontage that each home possesses. This happens every year, and it's only a percentage of the total cost.
Okay, thank you. It looks like Alder Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor. Is this something as a committee then we could change it instead of 3 years to 5 or 10?
I guess I would leave that up to maybe, all right.
The resolution has 5 and 10 in it now. If you look at it under the now therefore be it resolved, if the assessments are between 300 and 20,000, it's a 5-year payment schedule. And if the assessments are over 20,000, it's a 10-year payment schedule.
Okay, so that already exists then. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing any further questions, I think. Alder Ryan.
And where would we need to change that, if we want to change that? Because there's no one in this group that I believe is 30,000. I think we should be looking at something beyond 5,000 or say 3,000 or 5,000 to put on a 10-year payment plan. How do we do that? Is that done at the city council at a future meeting, or what can we do? I don't think I see anything that's over 30,000.
I imagine you could move to amend it, but I'd have to look at it later for legality. I don't have the ordinances. I didn't work on this resolution, so I don't have the ordinances and statutes in front of me to review tonight on the fly.
All right, then I would like to table it so that Ann can do that, and we could hopefully find out more information at the next meeting. But for our residents during the pandemic, and in my neighborhood in the Worley Park, the majority of the homes are under 100,000. Some of them are under 80,000, and this is a huge bill to be planning on paying. And I think in this times, the way the costs are and the hardships of other families and loss of work, that we as a city should be looking at something more lenient for a payment plan. Thank you.
Okay, I think in order to table it, we would need a second. Is there anybody here that would like to second this? Is there anybody here that would second? I don't see anybody seconding this, so that motion dies for lack of a second. Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. This item actually is on our agenda tonight and needs to pass tonight so that the bills can go out and so that people have time to pay them. They've been planning for them, but they need to get them paid by October 31st, or those bills continue on to the tax bill. And so there's a set schedule that this follows, and we don't have time to create a delay tonight.
Okay, are there any further questions? All right, I'm seeing none. I think we're ready to vote.
You may vote. Motion passes 9-1.
Okay, thank you very much. We are now moving on to file number 21.
Don't we have 11 people?
Dawn.
You have 10.
Yeah, yours didn't.
Her light worked, but,
Yeah, it just didn't register up here.
okay.
So it's 10-1.
Okay, thank you. All right. Good catch. We do have 11 people here. All right, file number 210903, mayor's appointments. It looks like we have 2 appointments for the Citizens Advisory Committee, CDBG, Karen Powers and Emily Voss. I would entertain a motion. A motion by Wadinsky, second by Neal, thirded by Peckham. Any comments? Alder Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor. I had asked of you and Tammy to get a list of who is on the committee at this point before these other vacancies. It just happens with the Community Development Block Grant. These are funds that are coming from HUD on a federal level, Housing and Urban Development, and that a lot of the purpose of having these funds locally is to work on issues that are for those areas of the city that are low income and homeless or have blight. And I talked with the director in the city of Milwaukee on the Community Development Block Grant this afternoon, and I do feel that with these funds, which are available every year, we do get a number of requests for proposals that are from different not-for-profits or for some new programs that are coming in the area. Some of them are also being done to the community foundation in our area. So people that are on that board would also be seeing these proposals if they were on this committee as well. There is only a few different committees in this around the city, with some organizations like the Neighbors Place and North Central Community Action that do, as part of their type of agencies that they are and their mission, is to have representatives in those population of disabled, hearing, and visually impaired or other disabilities. That may also happen with also North Central Healthcare as well. And having people that have been homeless or previously homeless, because on those issues, unless you've really dealt with those hardships, the rest of the population may have never dealt with that. And from the listing so far, I'm not aware of any questions have been representatives that have already been appointed on that committee. As of tonight, there are 2 people that have applied. One is Karen Powers, who's a former Parks Department. I believe she just recently retired. And then we have Ms. Voss, who is also on the board for the Community Foundation, and is doing some pretty magnificent work with her other background. But I do see a conflict in what if she was appointed, and I do feel that we can somehow, through one of the city attorneys, have an anonymous type of survey to see if those that are already appointed have these other background that could help us make sure that we are having people that are in these marginalized populations or communities, because this is what the funds are for. So I would recommend that this be tabled and go back and ask the survey of those individual members, and that be kept confidential. And then see if those are met, then I would say I would be potentially willing to consider these 2 candidates, but there's also 1 vacancy. And in talking to the director in Milwaukee today and telling them, for Wausau, about 40 to 50% of our population is living on the edge and are not wealthy, are living from paycheck to paycheck, or homeless, or in substandard housing. And so that there is a similar comparison in some ways to Wausau to Milwaukee. And according to that director, it said, well, if you don't have those kind of candidates on your commission, you should take a pause and go back and look for other candidates. And since this is an area that I do feel strongly is not normally represented, we need to hear their input. We may just ignore it if they're not part of the group and part of the team. So that's my suggestion. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to respond before I ask for a second to your motion to table. We do not collect data points on gender identity or ethnicity or income level. I will say that one of the folks that is already appointed to this body was somebody that expressed interest after having been helped by CDBG funds and the Community Development Office. So I can, I guess, draw some conclusions, but I don't know that we can do that with everybody. So there is a motion to table the appointments. Is there anybody that would like to second that motion? Is there anybody that would like to second? Okay, I don't see anybody that would like to second, so that motion dies due to lack of a second. The motion on the table is to appoint Karen Powers and Emily Voss to the Citizens Advisory Committee for Community Block Grant. Any further discussion? I'm not seeing any.
You may vote. Motion passes 10 to 1.
Okay, thank you very much. We are now on to file number 210809. It's a resolution from the Economic Development Committee approving a contract with Aplum PR to extend the campaign through February 2022. I know that our development director is on the line and can answer any questions if there are any. Otherwise, I would entertain a motion. I have a motion from Neal and a second from Watson. Alder Ryan.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. Since this contract has been in place for, I believe, over a year, and it's been extended again, I do think in lieu of our wanting to look at things as a community of having equal opportunities, I do think it's time for us to be putting out a request for proposals so that we could have other people apply that as part of other cities, like the city of Chicago. Since the 80s, they have had women's and minority type of contractors list, and that I do feel that we have a number of people that are very outstanding in this area that may be disabled but have a really brilliant background and could be doing something on a part-time basis. And just to continue on allowing the same people without opening it up to other people is keeping the status quo, which we said we weren't going to be doing. So I cannot approve extending this contract as is without an RFP. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. We had discussed this very issue in the Economic Development Committee, and as part of our discussion, we agreed to a relatively short-term extension of this contract, which then gives our new director time to get settled and then take stock of what actually needs to be in an RFP for these services. And our plan is certainly to conduct an RFP at the end of this short-term extension. So that's definitely on the radar. And so given the fact that the current provider has a lot of knowledge and can, keep this thing going until we are ready for that RFP, we decided to select her again, but that's certainly not a long-term deal.
Thank you. Alder Peckham.
Yeah, I agree with Alder Rasmussen, and I think especially since we have a letter, rather extensive statement from our new Economic Development Director saying that this is what she would prefer, have a little time to get another person on board and formulate some kind of a plan. I think we should approve this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any further requests to comment. I think we're ready to vote.
You can vote. Motion passes 10 to 1.
All right, thank you. We are now on to file number 160112. It's a resolution from the Finance Committee approving the adoption of vehicle lease pricing from Sourcewell. I would entertain a motion. Motion by Rasmussen. Do I have a second? Second by Herbst. Is there any discussion or questions? Okay, I don't see any.
begin voting. Motion passes unanimously.
All right, thank you very much. We are now on to file number 201109. It's a resolution from the Finance Committee approving the 2021 funding to perform engineering conceptual layouts to determine feasibility of a proposed new fleet facility maintenance shop, a review of properties located at 1300 Cleveland Avenue and 213 through 233 Myron Street and 400 Myron Street. I would entertain a motion by Rasmussen. Do I have a second? A second by Martins. Alder Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor. I had written Lisa as Chair of Finance as well as to our city attorney, Ann Jacobson, about my wanting to change my voice at the finance regarding this feasibility study. I'm also on the CISM. We did have a presentation from the consultants who had recommended the looking at the motor pool and as well as looking at the current building. And part of their presentation for over an hour and a half, I had asked, should we be looking at other locations around the city because the DPW is kind of landlocked where it is? And the consultant said yes. I had said, as well in CISM, is this part of something that we could be potentially at multiple locations in order to meet our needs? And the consultant said yes. So I guess I'm quite surprised, and I'm hoping some of our other CISM members will be as well, that the only recommended engineering plans and wanting to get this contract is looking at 3 locations that are less than a mile away of the current DPW. So it's not looking at overall the city, and I don't understand why that was not done. I thought that was pretty clear. It does seem that there has been some concerns from Lisa in saying the capital Projects Committee was actually the one that will make the decision of what will be the final capital projects. But that committee was not part of our hour-and-a-half presentation. And in not getting back to me and not giving me a chance to reverse my finance vote, I am concerned that that never was resolved and that I'm having to speak about it now. I do feel that when we're looking at a city for a new spot, especially in a neighborhood that has been marginalized, that I'm aware of for over 10 years or more, and they don't want any more industrial, including the city taking over most of their neighborhood, that we should be ignoring that. And I do feel that this should be going back to CISM for review and to be looking at the other possible options in the city, because that's what engineering was told, and that did not happen if they've only have 3 sites within a mile of where they're at, because the city of Wausau is bigger than 1 mile. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe before the next comment, I know that I was copied in on an email about the vote. Can you clarify, you can't reverse a vote after it's been taken, parliamentarian?
Correct, Mayor, and I apologize, Deb, if we didn't get back to you. I thought both Lisa Rasmussen and I at a minimum had gotten back to you. I know of no way to, I referred you to the committee chair to address your concerns, but I'm not aware of any way that you can go back and reverse your vote or retract it. It's been taken at a public meeting and reflected in the minutes.
We did talk about that was
Okay.
possible for back on the east side. I think it was either for Wausau Chemical or for the cheese company. You told us then it could, and that's what I referenced. We talked about this less than a year ago,
That
and
you
it
could-
was
That one person could just say, I've changed my mind since I voted at a committee without the committee taking it back up again under reconsideration?
Yes.
I don't recall
I
that.
don't recall that
apologize.
either, but, okay, thank you. Alder Killian, I have you next.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and if I may, just as an aside, briefly address the vote in question. I believe, and I'm not trying to speak for you, Alder Ryan, but I believe she may have been referring to if prior to the next meeting, it is noticed that someone who voted affirmatively would like it brought back for a vote, that it's my understanding in the rules that that can indeed occur if it's before the next immediate meeting. So
So the request for reconsideration as opposed to request to reverse a vote?
yes, perhaps it's a little semantics there, but I was just speaking to
Okay.
the vote reconsideration.
Well, our rules, that's Rule 10, that says any member who voted with the prevailing side on any question may move for reconsideration of that vote immediately after the vote or at the next succeeding regular meeting of the council. If it's defeated, it may not again be presented to council. I think you recently made your rules applicable to committees, to standing committees as well, which SISM is one. So under reconsideration, I think you would have had to bring it to the next SISM meeting and ask for a reconsideration of the vote under Rule 10, if that's what you're
Finance.
referring to.
The finance, and
For
I did.
finance, not
That's what
SISM,
my
okay.
email was about.
Okay, I'll maybe let you kind of scroll, look at this. Alder Killian, maybe you could discuss.
Yes.
What you'd like to.
I'll move on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I too am concerned and rather perplexed that this is before us tonight with 1300 Cleveland Avenue. And, we've talked about certain things in the past, like functional benefits or maybe emotional benefits, more akin to simple humanity, but still important. I'd like to talk about both of those. So no one on this body that I'm aware of has received the second round of soil and groundwater tests from that property. I inquired with the DNR, one rep from the DNR today, and they have not received those results to review either. So I'm quite stunned that this would be before us for some type of fiscal commitment on this when we do not even have those results back for review yet. And there's some significance to having those results and being able to review them. Without them, we simply would not have a complete picture of what's happening with that property or the nature and extent of contamination on that property. For example, between the first and second rounds, the DNR requested that a phthalate be added to the contaminants that are being tested for, and that has significance because it was a primary ingredient in Connor lacquer and varnish, and 3M found it about 10 feet away from 13 Cleveland Avenue when it was doing its separate tests in the railroad corridor. So something like that even has the potential to suggest that there could be other responsible parties in the mix. And also functionally, without getting those tests back and knowing the extent and nature of the contamination, we have absolutely no, let me underscore that one more time, we have absolutely no idea the full condition of that property. And the reason, one example of why that's important is because a simple cap on this property, even if you were to cap it all, that's simply not going to cut it. It's not going to be an effective, successful approach, even if you're using non-industrial RCLs or levels to guide the remediation, because with really an uncertain end use for the land, likely you're going to have some targeted excavation. Like there were above ground storage tanks there where the levels are much higher than other areas of the property, and there very well could be more areas like that. Even if there aren't, it still has not been reviewed by this body or the DNR yet. That should be kind of it right there, a non-starter, and this address should be removed from consideration. And then let's talk about the more human side of this and what we're really here to do when we come to to sit in these meetings and deliberate, and that's to serve the citizens and the community. And as Alder Neal had brought up at the CISM committee recently, that we've really signaled to the community that the residential zoning is not simply important because of perhaps some potential future residential land use, but it is critically important to the level of remediation that we have, many of us have committed to with the community. So up through the closure request and full closure process, if we are in agreement that we want a residential scenario style cleanup, it is important that we do not deviate from that, both in zoning or any plans or funding of plans or designs that would indicate otherwise. There are so many, this is a minefield, and there are so many things that could go wrong on that front. And so it's important we stay the course there because it's my understanding, and it's been said to me over and over again by regulators, that if certain things are changed, such as zoning or land use, under 99% of situations, they will not have the authority to require greater cleanup than those conditions. So it's important that we keep our word to the community, and we kind of recognize some of these facts and necessities. And lastly, I agree with what Alder Ryan has brought up about a consideration set, not only in this policy instance, but in all policy instances. It's very hard for policymakers when we're put into a situation. I'm not talking about the two addresses, one immediately adjacent to the current facility and one on it. I'm talking about Cleveland Avenue. It's very hard when we're put into a position of, hey, you have one option and it's a bad one. We should have the situation where here's a consideration set of multiple options. Now, it's not too much to ask for that, because if we go back just a few months, we would realize if some of these proposals had been approved, such as 3M or Colby, this property wouldn't even be viable for the consideration set. So knowing that's the reality, what would have happened then? There would have been other properties to consider. So I think Alder Ryan is right on with her comments about that. And I think we've got to be trusted by our citizens. We should know the full picture or situation before entering into it. And we need to vet things a little better than has happened in prior years. So I think that if this moved forward without Cleveland Avenue on it, that would be acceptable to me. But if it's going to stay on there, then I would certainly vote against this. Thank you.
Thank you. It sounded at one point that I might have heard an amendment request. Is that what I heard?
Yes, and that will not cut off discussion. Is that correct,
No,
Madam
we
Chair?
we would move to discussion about 1300 Cleveland Avenue being removed, which is what I believe I heard. So we would need a second, and we'd talk about that, and then we would move back. Okay, I have a second. Assuming what you made was a motion to remove 1300 Cleveland Avenue from this consideration.
Yes, that's
Okay,
correct, Madam
we have a
Chair.
motion by Killian and a second by Peckham. All right, discussion is now about removing 1300 Cleveland Avenue from this resolution. I want to give the alders who have lined up to request to speak. Would you like to speak on this? Okay, Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. Personally, I think that we need to keep all three options active in our research, because we have requested, through the action of this council and the Economic Development Committee, a robust plan for testing that's already in progress. And we've actually gone back to get additional samples based on some preliminary results. So the testing we asked for, that was the most aggressive testing option that we were offered, is happening. I think that can happen in parallel with the feasibility study, because what a feasibility study is not final action, and it's not site selection. And so this is following a similar track as far as site selection that we followed with Firehouse Number 2. Before that building was built on a parcel of land we already owned, they also looked at some alternate sites closer to the business campus and determined that the access to the infrastructure was sufficient where it was at, and the land acquisition costs would be way too high to move it. They ended up putting it on the site they had. Now, that said, we need information to make decisions. And all this is us determining if that site is useful or not. Is it the right size or not? Is the access a challenge? Will it work or won't it? And so if that feasibility study comes back, they may find that that site is no good for it in the first place. But if we don't fund the study, we can't get those answers. They may come back to us and tell us that one of the other two is a better option. Well, at least then we have some guidance. And ultimately, the council will pick the location. And so the fleet facility is proposed as a 2022 CIP project, and it's scored highly in the Capital Projects Committee. That said, that committee doesn't pick the site, the Finance Committee doesn't pick the site, we pick the site. But without knowing if that site, or if any of them, are conducive or not, we have nothing to go on. And if we wait to complete all of the environmental and all of the remediation, and then we start a feasibility study, we are late to the table to even move forward. So I think all these things can happen in parallel. And, we just don't make a final decision until we have the answers we want. But I don't see any practical purpose to stalling the research on the feasibility study, because that really harms nobody. And we all have sat here and committed, when we rezoned it as residential, to a robust level of cleanup. Whether the city occupies it, whether someday houses occupy it, it doesn't matter. We wanted a robust level of cleanup. So we may find that we clean something up to a residential standard that benefits everyone around the site, and then use it for something that isn't houses. But at the end of the day, environmentally, that's still a win. So I don't think there's any harm in us moving forward with the feasibility study, because that is such a benign step in all of the process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Alder Larson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think there would be harm in moving ahead with a feasibility study there, because why spend money on a property that's not available? We don't, as Alder Killian said, we don't know what's there. We don't know what's there. I am in full favor of removing 1300 Cleveland Avenue. It borders my district. I get complaints already because of the design of Thomas Street. I have industrial traffic on First Avenue that never had it before. And I would also like to voice my disapproval on how this came about, because I am on the SISM committee. These properties, capital improvements come to the capital improvements committee. We should have discussed these properties, all these properties, prior to it going to the have We should have had properties set prior before it went to the finance, so the finance committee could have said, okay, these are the properties you had, this is what the bids we want, not the other way around. To me, this is all putting the cart before the horse, as far as using 1300 Cleveland Avenue is putting the cart before the horse. I'm afraid it could lead to a bait and switch, where all of a sudden, well, yeah, let's put our Department of Public Works there, and then all of a sudden, well, because we decide to do that, well, all of a sudden we don't have to clean it up to residential standards anymore, and that's what I'm afraid of. And I feel we as a council, we voted to clean this and remediate this to residential standards. We owe it to the citizens of this community to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Peckham.
Thank you, Mayor. I was wondering if I could ask Director of Public Works Lindman to come up and ask her a couple of questions. I need some clarification. And I can ask the first one as you make your way to the microphone, sir.
Good evening.
Has engineering feasibility work already begun on 1300 Cleveland Avenue?
Yeah, it did start on 1300 as well as the existing facility site. We had some money in our engineering professional services account, which we had started that, but
So you used
we
the
had-
10,000 that is mentioned in the packet
Yep.
to start that?
correct, yeah, to start gathering information and put information together, yeah. But
Okay.
we're not going to be able to, move ahead. We have to take something off if we don't get additional money,
Okay.
And so, yeah.
I think that's good for the council to know. That this is presented as we are approving money to do it, and it's already underway.
Some of it is, yeah. But what we need to do is try to determine if these, I mean, we have some concepts down on paper, but we don't know if they're feasible yet. We don't know what costs are. We don't have a full picture yet, so,
Okay.
yep.
And it might have escaped me in the packet, but could you explain the 213 to 233 Myron Street and the acquisition? That would be the acquisition of additional residential properties?
Yeah, there's one commercial or non-residential property there, and the rest are
I couldn't tell from the
residential.
aerial photo what was in there, but it's a non-residential and a residential?
Yeah, I think there's one non-residential, and I think there's 4 residential properties along that stretch of land.
So that option would involve the purchase of 5 properties. They're small ones, right? Pretty narrow.
The
lot.
residential are, the non-residential is, it's probably 2 or 3 city lots.
Okay. And I wasn't clear on that. So my last question is, like, if you were looking at the current footprint and you're looking at acquiring more property, at what point did 1300 Cleveland Avenue become an attractive third option? What went into that thinking?
Last year, when we initially were looking at putting some plans together on what would work on our existing site, and what properties we would need to purchase, on the initial rendering, it sort of came to light that we were trying to piecemeal things together. And so then we had the Mercury study that came in and said that the actual shop that we were looking at was too small for our size of fleet, so we had to expand the shop. And so when we started looking at already what we were using and what we were proposing to purchase, which was just the non-residential site in that area and using our existing property, we weren't able to fit it in there. And so then but in order to do it more like the 213 to 233 Myron Street, when we started looking at the acquisition costs for that and then the unknowns on whether those property owners would even want to sell, we decided to look at other properties, and in Cleveland we already owned, so there was no additional cost to the city at this point to purchase that property. The other thing that we're looking at is the continuity of our operations, and so looking at a site that's maybe on the west side or purchasing property over there, the continuity of our operations becomes challenged with that. So we're trying to find properties that, in areas that we can, keep that continuity of operations feasible for us and efficient as possible.
You don't have the results or anything on the 1300 Cleveland feasibility yet, but does it seem like that facility would use that entire parcel?
What the consultant had said to us is that really what we're asking to put on a piece of property, they would recommend 10 to 12 acres. That piece on Cleveland is, I believe, 6 or 6.5 acres. So depending on, how it lays out, according to him, he feels like it's going to be too small.
1300 Cleveland would still be too small?
Yeah. Because we have to look at turning radiuses for vehicles, for ladder trucks, for the fire department, for semi-trucks, And so, and those turning radiuses, take up a lot of space coming in and out of those bays, so, yep.
That's rather surprising. So we think right now it might be too small, but we want to spend $25,000 to look at it?
No, I think what we want to do is we want to look at the feasibility if rather than putting everything there, can we put the shop or can we put vehicle storage there? Can we do something with that site that would allow us maybe to use the other site to put a shop, So we're trying to look at different options rather than having everything on one site. Can we have another site that would accommodate, those are the feasibility things that we're trying to piece together. And And we just can't do that. We can't come back to you with any sort of recommendation without, putting scenarios together. And so this money that we're asking for will put those scenarios together to see what's viable. Or do we have to continue to look?
Okay, and I promised the mayor this is my last question on this topic.
All right, keeping you to it.
Would have been a request. Is there an advantage to keeping what we might put on 1300 Cleveland Avenue? Is there an advantage to keeping that within a few blocks of the existing facilities rather than the other corner of town?
Yeah, I mean, just continuity of operations, right? So, and depending on what's there, is it just, vehicle storage for our large equipment? Is it just the shop versus no storage? And then how does that affect our operations? There's a lot of questions up in the air right now. So I can't answer the specifics for it because I don't know exactly what could fit on that site at this point in time and then how that would affect our operations. So
Thank you.
that's part of the viability too.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Alder McElhaney.
Thank you. I have a question. When are you looking to, after the feasibility, I know it, has to go through our bureaucracy, but when were you planning on hopefully starting to build or to make solid plans?
Well, through the budget process, if the costs for the design get approved through council for 2022, we would hope in early '22 before spring that we would be able to start design. So
okay.
it would be at this point through that time that we would, hopefully be able to determine what sites are viable, what aren't for a
Okay,
decision
but we
by
wouldn't
the
start
council.
building until,
The building wouldn't start until '23.
okay. Next question, in your estimation, do you believe all the information and cleanup that is necessary for 1300 Cleveland would be completed by '23?
No.
Then this is my question, is I don't believe, I will be supporting the amendment to take it off. If we are not going to have, we know how long it takes to clean up. Even just to get these tests, it's been a year, right? And so we know that that is an issue. We have said we were going to do a robust cleanup. I don't, as much as it could fit there, we won't have feasibility that we can't start because we won't have it known and we won't have it cleaned up. So that is my problem, and I am supporting to take that off. I hope we can find other things that that we can do, and we'll find something for that site. But I don't see. I mean, I can see just a train going towards each other. If we can't. We don't want to wait to build, right? This is a necessity. And if we, and I don't feel like, even though we spent some money at looking at Cleveland, I don't want to spend some more money and saying, yeah, this is good. Oh, no, we can't build for 2 or 4 years until we clean this up, as long as it takes. Then we're going to start over again. So I'm going to, again, I'm saying I'm going to support the amendment to remove. I am going ahead with the other sites. And, if you come back with another site, I'll support that as well. But I just think that we are at cross purposes, and I don't think the time frame and the timeline with how long it's been and finding more contaminants that, are going to need to be cleaned up, that it's a viable spot in our time frame. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. All right, Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. Assuming that this is a phased project, because we had talked about this in a number of different ways for CIP, first the design, site selection, implementation, and then phased construction. I think when we looked at originally the Barrientos plan and then the Mercury study, part of those options was that the entire facility was not to be relocated, correct? So you'd have potentially the office remodel, maybe remodel to some of the existing buildings at the 400 Myron Street site. Obviously, the salt shed can't be moved. So even if a fleet facility is constructed on any site, that is not going to be a complete relocation of DPW, correct? They'd still have, that's why they wanted to be in the same area, right? Because you're going to be operating from at least 2 different locations.
That's correct, yeah. Yep,
Okay.
that's the way it looks right now, yep.
Okay, and so with the preliminary information that we had on Cleveland, given the small size of the site based on their recommendation, is there any alternate site other than 1300 Cleveland that we should be looking at? Even if we had to buy it?
Yeah, I haven't found any. You know, I mean, I think the idea would be is that if 1300 Cleveland is off the table, then we would start looking for other sites to consider. But based on the recommendations, maybe looking for larger sites, you know. So, you know, so that maybe we can put more on one site. You know, the challenge with our existing site too, it's in, some of it's in the floodplain. So construction costs go up. The challenge with 1300 Cleveland and the environmental cleanup is that that site will not be closed, but whatever gets developed there will need a soil management plan as part of the cleanup. So, and that's where we talk about like development of a site, you know, that's a brownfield site or otherwise, right? Just like we're doing on the riverfront and other environmental cleanup sites, is that even though we get closure or we get to a point that, you know, once we develop that site with whatever it is, this or something else, there's going to be a soil management plan. It'll have closure with contingencies on it, you know, so once you start digging in that site again, you know, you're going to have those environmental issues again. So, you know, 1300 Cleveland, just, you know, we thought because we owned it, it was good to at least take a look at to see how our operations would function, to see what could be there and see how things would function. We can continue to look for other sites, even trying to piecemeal other purchases of other properties together. But then we're back to significant cost again for the purchase of properties.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. I have Alder Killian next.
Madam Chair, I believe Alder Wadinsky may have been in front
Oh,
of me.
I had him after you.
Oh, okay.
I'm keeping track.
Okay, then, thank you. Well, I've got some questions while you're up there, Mr. Lindman. So the kind of momentum from this came out of the CIP affairs, is that correct?
Yep.
The requests for monies and so forth to pursue this?
Yeah, we've been requesting this, or at least the department has for, you know, over a decade, you know, to move this forward. And it's had a lot of momentum this year with the CIP, so we're hopeful that it gets approved to move forward.
It sounds, though, as to your earlier comments, that you'd started working on the assessment, your consultants of 13 Cleveland Avenue, even before CIP.
No, not before CIP, no.
When did that occur precisely?
This summer, we began when we had made the determination that since we own that property, maybe we should consider that as part of our, as part of an idea for use. Yep.
Who was informed of that at the time?
I think just staff made that decision.
Do you recall ever an email from the city council president to yourself asking her to loop in the District 3 alder person if you were considering doing that type of thing, or anything that could cause a zoning change in the future with the land use?
I don't recall off the top of my head.
Okay. I picked up some emails at the city clerk's office this past week, and that email does exist. And, you know, I think we're running into several problems here. And one is, yes, the failure to loop in older people, I think, has brought some problems that didn't need to occur to the table. Also, with some of the things that were said earlier by the gentle lady from District 7 about this can work environmentally and we can do both simultaneously. I'm just a layperson in the environmental field, but I guess I could call myself a citizen expert in that realm, and I've been interviewed at the state and national level on how polluters function and kind of what the quote-unquote polluter handbook is, so to speak. So with numerous years of experience, I can tell you and my colleagues that will not work based on my experiences. And And as a matter of the things we've been talking about with environmental justice, I mean, not only is it important to keep the community involved, it's important to keep the community's representatives involved, and particularly at the request of the city council president, I think that should have been done. So also, when I had spoken with the DNR over, times over the last few years, my understanding is, and I'd be willing to bet kind of dollars to donuts to this, that if it's residential zoning and the city would want to try to ever pursue closure using just industrial RCLs or standards, I don't believe regulators would ever accept that. So the zoning and land use is critically important. I can tell you based on my deep experience in this realm that these things cannot happen together. And I think we owe it to the people to make good on our word. And also, and thank you, Mr. Lindman, I appreciate those answers to my questions. And I would also say that I am the older person that serves on the Sustainability Committee, which is, if you review municipal code, is considered the advisory body on environmental matters. It is advisory. But recently, just at one of the perhaps the last meeting, the Sustainability Committee voted, I believe unanimously, to have Mr. Lenz draft an advisory letter to the council, which stated essentially that any industrial usage that would come to this property that didn't come out of a public participation process would be unacceptable. And it listed a set of considerations that had come from the public participation process. So things that had been citizen driven. And as Mr. Barth said earlier, one of those was potential use as a solar garden for a portion of that property. Others have brought up other possibilities. This would be mutually exclusive. So just to make clear, several things based on my extensive experience, which has been state and nationally recognized in this particular realm with contamination. This cannot occur together. Secondly, the Sustainability Committee has already voted for an advisory letter, which would be mutually exclusive with what's being suggested tonight. And then lastly, we really have no clear picture about what's going on at that site. So until the DNR does an extensive review and our body has the ability to review it, at best, we're throwing money at a possible problem. At worst, we're undercutting our democratic process and really, I think, playing Keystone Cops on our environmental policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Wodinski.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Lindman, you said you need 10 to 12 acres, according to...
Yeah, according to the consultant, that's their recommendation, to put everything that we're talking about on one site.
What
Yeah.
do we have at Myron?
I don't know the exact, but I think we're looking at maybe 8, to 9. But
Okay.
some of that is in the floodplain, has to be raised up. There's some significant challenges down there as well.
Okay, so this feasibility study would give us more information on what's there, what we could possibly do there. Would give us information on, if we look at 1300 Cleveland, the possibility of maybe a storage facility or something else that DPW could use because it's close to where the other facility is. I'm kind of curious. I'm kind of curious to see what a feasibility study would show on all those locations and variations. With the council also being aware that I would not support anything before it's cleaned up. So I'm going to support the feasibility study because I'm a curious guy.
Okay, thank you. Alder Watson.
So it's largely residential, right, where the current site is? Right?
Yeah, it is.
Has any, non-residential areas, out by the business campus, been something that we could, because I think, we sort of want to keep our, residential neighborhoods not as industrialized as that, and they already have a lot of stuff going in and out. Has any other considerations been, looked at outside? I know maybe we don't own property.
Right, and we haven't, Sarah, we haven't like broadened our search for the rest of the city at all. The talks internally have just been, trying to maintain those operations and what would be best.
Because I think it would be really cool if it could, and I know it's probably way more costly, but it would be nice to see what would happen
Yep.
to just lift that and get a whole campus that you would have somewhere intact that would be outside of a residential area.
Yeah, and we can certainly do that.
And is that something that could be worked into the feasibility study as it's with the additional funds?
Yeah, I mean, like right now, this is really just looking at these 3 sites, and that, that includes not only the layouts, but the estimates, the budgeting, so there's a lot more involved than just looking at pictures, I guess, but if for some reason, 1300's off the table tonight, then we would use that money to look at other options and other sites, so yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Alder Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor. Eric, I wanted to get back to where the existing sewer plant is now as part of the DPW campus. So if we wanted to delay and get the new sewer plant going, and then look at the demolition and see if there is some feasibility, when would be the sewer plant, the current one, out of operation?
The wastewater facility will be fully complete in early '23, I think February of '23.
And any idea of what that, the existing sewer plant would be taking of acreage-wise, or are you already including that as part of the Myron campus of 8 to 9 acres overall?
No, the wastewater facility is not included in any of the acreage that I have spoken with you.
Do you have any idea what the old one is approximately? Is it 2 acres?
Are we talking wastewater, Deb, or are we talking water? I'm talking about the wastewater down by where Streets is now, correct?
Right.
Okay. So I don't know what the wastewater property,
I just thought
area is.
that's really part of the overall campus of the DPW, isn't it?
well, they're separate. The wastewater is owned by the utility, and the DPW, the Streets campus, those are separated. So,
But couldn't we, I don't know, maybe legally, sell it to the utilities, sell it to DPW for $1? Is that a potential, or?
we don't have any space to sell. I mean, the space for the wastewater, the wastewater's staying in the same location.
I thought it was being built next to one another.
No,
Okay.
no,
All right. I guess for my concern on SISM, I had hoped that we would be looking at other locations, and having recently just looked at some of the 9/11 footage, it just seems, why should we put DPW as one location as potentially ground zero? Wouldn't it be a good idea to be having another site, just in case something happened, that operations would continue on in another area of town? And so I cannot support the 1300 Cleveland Avenue. I do feel the neighbors deserve not to be, 30-40% of their neighborhood is city properties, that we do need to be looking at another location. So I cannot vote for 1300 Cleveland Avenue as one of the sites. Thank you.
Alder Herbst.
First of all, I do definitely support this feasibility study. My other comment is, I'm sure, and I'm going to read my notes, I'm sure trying to find a large enough property is like pie in the sky and could possibly cost more to travel back and forth to do the jobs. So I really think trying to find a property, like for example, out into the industrial park, is just totally out of the question. So I am supporting this 100%. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Rasmussen, I do want to note that this is the third time on the amendment. If there's any opposition, otherwise I don't have any.
Thank you.
You'd like to speak?
Yep, no, just a point of
I
clarification.
oppose.
Okay,
Just a,
so we can, so if we have opposition, do we vote then to allow the Alder to speak again? I have it as the third. Killian made the amendment. Parliamentary.
She objects, so now I guess take a vote to decide whether you want to comment.
Okay, so the council now must vote to allow.
oh, it doesn't matter. Let's just vote on this. We've dragged this out forever. I'll hold my comment.
Okay, all right. Parliamentarian time.
City attorney time, not parliamentarian time.
Attorney time.
I just wanted to remind everybody, and I don't see the, a memo or the finance minutes in the packet. Perhaps it wasn't printed for my packet, but I thought when this came to finance, it was noted as a budget modification. It's technically a transfer of funds, already approved in the budget, and so the way the resolution is titled is simply approving a transfer of funds from $15,000 from one budget line to another budget line. And yet the be it resolved is approving contracting for engineering services, which are sort of two different things to me, but what's controlling is what's in the be it resolved. So when you saw me stand up, I gave to Mary some proposed language for the amendment, since none of the addresses are mentioned in the action in the resolution, because you're merely approving the transfer of funds at this point. You're not approving sites or additional sites or exception, but that's in the whereas. That's just merely explanatory. What counts is what's at the very end. The action the council is taking is always under the be it resolved. This is what we resolved to do. So I've asked her to read a new be it resolved paragraph that allows for the transfer of funds, but does not allow the feasibility study or the contract to look at 1300 Cleveland Avenue. I understand that that captures the current amendment or motion to amend the resolution.
All right.
So you're really amending the be it
The
resolved
clerk
paragraph.
Read the amendment language.
So the last paragraph would be amended to read, now therefore be it resolved that the proper city officials are hereby authorized to contract for additional engineering services for the fleet facility as recommended, with the exception of 1300 Cleveland Avenue. And then it goes on with the account number.
Okay, so that is the amendment you are ready to vote on. I'm ready, if you're ready.
And you may begin voting. The motion passes 6-5.
Okay, so now we have the resolution as amended. Is there any further discussion? Looks like we've talked enough about this, except for Alder Larson.
So correct me, the funds will be appropriated then to continue with the study, is that correct? With
Yep, the
last
study will happen without 1300 Cleveland Avenue as an option.
vote? Thank you.
Okay.
So this will be for the resolution as amended. You may begin voting. Motion passes unanimously.
All right, thank you, everyone. We are now on to file number 200310. It's a resolution from the Human Resources Committee ratifying the revised policy for employees with symptoms or exposure of novel COVID-19 coronavirus. I would entertain a motion. I have a motion by Herbst. Do I have a second? A second by Neal. Any comments or discussion? Alder Killian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just, when I was looking at the minutes of prior committee meetings, and I think with what was reflected in a memo in the packet, Alder Martins had asked the question in committee that by doing this, we may open ourselves up to increased liability, or in a negligence claim that we may have less solid footing. Is that understanding correct?
I would say that's certainly possible, but it's always going to be subject to proof.
if I may ask, Ms. Jacobson, proof of what specifically?
Well, I assume that you, shouldn't make too many assumptions, but I guess I'm assuming that you're asking that by removing the requirement that employees are required to follow CDC recommendations and leaving it that employees are recommended to follow CDC recommendations, that there's no enforceable requirement of any kind, and because of that and the rising COVID cases, that we are maybe exposing ourselves further to liability. Is that your question? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
So you were suggesting proof of causation?
Correct.
Yes, okay, I understand. that.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Any further questions or comments? I'm seeing none.
You may begin voting. Motion passes 8-3.
Okay, thank you. The next item, I will ask you to suspend the rules. 12A, referral of resolutions. This does require a 2/3 vote majority. I would entertain a motion. Motion by Neal. Second by Killian. I think we can vote.
You may vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. All right, we are now on to file number 090213. It's a resolution approving termination of a memorandum of developer agreement, Union Station of Wausau, II LLC, and 411 Westwood Drive LLC. Do you want to give us a little background on this?
Are you asking me?
Yes,
Okay.
please. Thank you.
Sure. This is out by Rasmussen College, and the memorandum was recorded as a summary of the developer agreement, and Scott Jackman represents Gadorzi, and they have simply asked us to terminate, in essence, the development agreement, so that, because all of the obligations have been met, and I went to great lengths to verify that with staff who would know and confirm for me that the few obligations in there have been met. And I don't think we typically do this, but in this case, I'm comfortable doing that because all of the conditions have been met.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions or I guess I need a motion. Motion by Rasmussen. Second by Neal. Any discussion? Okay, I think we're ready to vote on this one.
You may begin voting. Motion passes unanimously.
All right, thank you very much. We are on the almost last agenda item, public comment and suggestions. If there's anybody in the audience who's waited this long, you're welcome. Not seeing anybody join us, so I think we are ready to move on. Alder Peckham.
Not so fast.
I guess it'll be a suggestion that we're hearing?
This would be a suggestion that all of us consider attending La Fiesta event Saturday at Brockmeyer Park, sponsored by Hispanic organizations, and afternoon and evening primarily, with lots of activities, and I'm betting there's going to be a lot of good food out there, so y'all come.
Awesome. All right, thank you. I guess I would entertain the last item on our agenda, move to adjourn. I'm staring at my adjournment guy, and he's not making a motion by Larson. Any second? Second by anyone? Oh, okay, we got a second by Peckham. We don't need to vote on this, so we are now adjourned. Thank you.